I was the husband of a decorated officer, a position everyone envied. But my wife had been wounded in combat, suffering injuries to her vocal cords and groin that stripped her of her ability to speak and her functions as a woman. Yet I never once resented it. I stayed by her side willingly, spending 39 years in a sexless marriage with a woman who couldn't speak. That is, until my 65th birthday. I was in her study when I stumbled upon a box filled with 520 prepaid phone cards, all used to call the one person she loved but could never have, her first love. It was only then that the truth hit me. My wife wasn't incapable of speaking. She just had no desire to speak to me. She wasn't unable to be a woman. She just didn't want to be my woman. The immense shock was too much to bear, and I died with a heart full of hatred. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in 1985. Staring at my younger self in the mirror, I swore a silent oath. In this life, I wouldn't let any woman make me suffer again. The 80s were a golden age for entrepreneurs. Riding the wave of economic reform, I decided I would go to Austin, Texas to make my fortune. But transportation from my small hometown was primitive. I borrowed a bicycle from the head of the local women's committee and pedaled all afternoon, finally making it to the station just before sunset to buy my ticket. As I was leaving, however, I saw her at the arrivals gate, Chloe Miller, just stepping off the bus. When she saw me, Chloe's elegant eyebrows knitted together in a frown. "Ethan," she began, her voice laced with annoyance. "Didn't I tell you not to meet me at the station?" It was only then that I remembered. Today was the day Chloe was supposed to come home on leave from the military base. In my past life, around this time, I had sent her a telegram. I told her we'd been engaged for 3 years, and in our small town, a man of 20 without a wife was a laughingstock. I told Chloe I wanted to get married, to finally join her on the base as her husband. In the service, once an officer reached a certain rank, they could have their family join them. The military would even help dependents find jobs or schooling. For couples separated by distance, it was the moment they dreamed of. Chloe had been promoted to colonel last year, which meant she was eligible to have me join her. I had been waiting eagerly for her to bring me to the base, but she always refused. I grew desperate and sent another telegram, threatening to pack my bags and show up at the base myself if she didn't come for me. That forced her hand. She came back, albeit reluctantly, and specifically told me not to meet her at the station. I knew she was intentionally trying to keep her distance from me. In my past life, it had broken my heart. I felt that since we were engaged, even without a marriage license or a wedding night, in the eyes of our town, we were already husband and wife. I wanted to be with Chloe to get that marriage certificate so I could move to the base, take care of her, and start a family. But this life was different. I had completely abandoned the dream of being a military husband. My heart was set on making a new start in Austin, so much so that I had completely forgotten she was coming home. I was here to buy a ticket to Austin, not to meet her. Chloe had misunderstood, and her beautiful, refined face was a mask of impatience. "Are you really that desperate? We're still young. There's no need to rush into marriage. Life on the base is tough. It's not a vacation. If you came, you'd just be a distraction, and I'm still trying to advance my career." Every word out of her mouth was an excuse to keep me away from the base. "I'm not here for you," I said calmly, "and I agree it's too soon to get married. I'm not joining you on the base." My words left Chloe stunned for a moment, but her shock quickly morphed into a scornful smile. "Ethan, when did you learn to play hard to get?" She was convinced I was hopelessly in love with her and couldn't believe for a second that I'd actually given up on the idea of joining her. I didn't bother explaining. In 5 days, I'd be on my way to Austin. After that, we'd be worlds apart, with nothing tying us together. The journey from the city back to our village was over 20 miles, a trip I had made on that borrowed bicycle. On the way back, I gave Chloe a ride on the back of the bike. Took us a solid 3 hours to get home. She didn't say a single word the entire time. The awkward silence on that ride reminded me of the lonely, silent 39 years of our marriage in my past life. It was past 8 o'clock by the time we reached the village. The villagers were frugal and rarely used electricity, so the entire place was pitch black. Our arrival was announced by a chorus of barking dogs. My mother died when I was young, and my father had died 10 years ago, saving Chloe's life. For all those years since, I had lived with her family, the Millers. Mr. and Mrs. Miller were good people. They had always treated me like their own son. As we walked in, Mrs. Miller was warming up dinner at the stove. She started in on Chloe immediately. "Chloe, you've finally done the right thing, agreeing to take your husband to the base with you. If you're together every day, we might get to hold a big, healthy grandbaby soon." Chloe just pressed her lips together in a tight line, saying nothing. She was incredibly strong-willed. In my past life, because she hadn't married the man she truly loved, she chose to remain childless, ensuring the Miller family line ended with her. Mr. and Mrs. Miller both passed away filled with that regret. Mr. Miller noticed his daughter's impatience and quickly interjected, "You be good to Ethan. The Wright family did you a great service. If his father hadn't saved you that day, you wouldn't even be alive, let alone be a colonel. That's enough. I already said I'd marry him, so can you please stop pressuring me?" Chloe finally snapped. "I'm grateful that Mr. Wright saved me, but it was just an accident. I would rather have died myself than be saddled with a debt so large I'd have to spend my entire life repaying it. 10 years ago, my dad was the captain of the town's volunteer fire department. That year, a flash flood tore through the area. Chloe was swept into a ravine, and my father dove into the raging water to pull her out. He managed to save her, but he was exhausted and didn't make it out himself. I became an orphan, and I'd lived with the Millers ever since. 'Son,' they had said, 'from now on, you're one of the Millers. You're our own son, and you'll be Chloe's husband.' That promise had cost me a lifetime. Chloe married me because of that promise, but she always felt like she was being blackmailed by a sense of duty. She hated me for taking over her life and getting in the way of her true love. That's why, even after 39 years of marriage, she never let me touch her and wouldn't deign to speak a word to me. What kind of attitude is that? Is that any way for a person to talk? You really think just because you're a colonel, I'm afraid to set you straight? You little girl, even if you were a general, I'd still be your father." Mr. Miller was fuming. Worried that I was hurt, he grabbed a rolling pin and looked ready to use it on Chloe. "Mr. Miller, I'm just tired. Let's eat first," I said, trying to defuse the situation. I had to step in. I was leaving in a few days anyway, and I just wanted some peace and quiet. Besides, I knew the more her father lost his temper, the more Chloe would despise me. You couldn't force someone as stubborn as her to do anything. "Ethan," Mrs. Miller whispered, taking my hand, "you need to be firm with Chloe. You can't let her walk all over you. She would have been a wonderful mother-in-law, but it was clear we weren't destined for that in this lifetime." We had just sat down at the table, before anyone could even pick up their forks, when the town's PA system crackled to life with the mayor's booming voice. "Chloe Miller, you have an urgent call from the base. I repeat, Chloe Miller." Hearing the announcement, Chloe shot to her feet. "I have to get back to the base." With that, she grabbed her bag and walked out without a backward glance. It was exactly the same as what happened in my past life. She had barely been home long enough to sit down before Leo Vance called her away. Leo was a performer in the military's arts troupe, handsome, charming, a singer, a dancer, a poet. He was Chloe's first love. For Leo, Chloe would walk through fire. In my past life, after Chloe left, Mr. and Mrs. Miller had taken me to the base themselves. They even got her commanding general to act as a witness for our marriage. Under that much pressure, Chloe finally caved and agreed to sign the marriage license, allowing me to stay. But on our wedding night, another call from Leo summoned her away. She claimed it was for an urgent mission. When she finally returned, she had those injuries to her vocal cords and groin. I never got to experience what it was to be a husband that night or for the next 39 years. My only communication with my own wife was through pen, paper, and hand gestures. I swallowed my tears and dedicated myself to taking care of her and to looking after her parents. I was such a fool back then. It never occurred to me to question how a mute could possibly rise through the ranks from colonel to a high-ranking command position. She would have been medically discharged years ago. The truth was, she could communicate perfectly fine on the base, giving orders and holding conversations. She just couldn't be bothered to speak to me. I was always respectful of her work and never pried into her life on the base, which is how she managed to deceive me for decades. It all came crashing down on my 65th birthday, when I was cleaning her study and found that box with over 500 international calling cards. Leo, it turned out, had moved abroad. He'd been divorced twice and his life was a mess. Chloe felt she had failed him, and so she spent 39 years trying to make it up to him. She bought his house and his cars overseas. She refused to have children with me, yet she treated Leo's 3 children from his previous marriages as her own. She paid for their tuition and living expenses. When they got married, it was Chloe who attended as the parental representative, and I had been kept in the dark about all of it. I never questioned where her money went. I gave her my complete trust, and in return, I received the coldest, most heartless betrayal imaginable. When I learned the truth, my world shattered. In my despair, I jumped from the balcony. So, in this new life, I was done with women I couldn't warm up to. With 4 days left before my trip to Austin, I started packing. Being an orphan was lonely, but it had one advantage. I had no ties. I could leave whenever I wanted. I packed a few changes of clothes into a duffel bag. I carefully sewed a hidden pocket into my undershirt to hold my ID and $400. It was my entire life savings. In 1985, when a factory worker made maybe $30 a month, $400 was a fortune. It was the compensation money from my father's death, and I hadn't touched it in 10 years. In my past life, I had used that money to buy Chloe a fancy watch, a sewing machine, and a brand new bicycle to take with us when we got married and moved to the base. I never saw her wear that watch, not even once. This time, I wasn't about to waste my efforts on someone who didn't appreciate them. This $400 was my seed money, my ticket to starting a new life in Austin. When Mr. and Mrs. Miller saw me packing, they assumed I was finally going to join Chloe at the base and were overjoyed. They offered to take me to the station, but I declined. Mrs. Miller then tried to press another $500 into my hand. I refused, but she insisted, so I had no choice but to accept it. My father had given his life for their family. I felt I could accept the money with a clear conscience. 3 days before I left for Austin, I went to my parents' graves to say goodbye. Dad, Mom, I'm heading to Austin. I'm going to be part of this new economic boom. Wait for me to come back. And don't you worry, I'll be happy, even without Chloe. Sunday arrived quickly. I said my goodbyes to Mr. and Mrs. Miller and left the small town I had called home for more than 20 years. The old train clattered down the tracks, carrying me toward Austin. It was a journey of over 600 miles, requiring 3 transfers and taking 3 days and 2 nights. Whether by coincidence or some twist of fate, my first transfer was in the city where Chloe's military base was located. I had a 3-hour layover, but I had no intention of using the time to say goodbye to Chloe. There was no point. She wouldn't have cared anyway. I was just grabbing a bowl of noodles at a simple diner near the station when, of all people, I saw Chloe. And with her was Leo Vance. Leo was dressed in a stylish shirt that made him stand out in the crowd. They were eating there too. A large bag sat next to Leo, clearly containing a costume. It looked like his performance troupe was heading out of town, and Chloe was there to see him off. Our eyes met across the room. I didn't want to be the first to speak, planning to just pretend I hadn't seen her. But after a brief flash of embarrassed anger colored her cheeks, her expression quickly hardened into one of cool superiority. Chloe strode over to my table. Ethan, you're getting more and more audacious. I didn't come to get you, so what gives you the right to just show up at the base on your own? Do you think this is some kind of game? There's a lot of paperwork involved. You're just making things difficult for me. Chloe had always been exceptional, a rising star in the military. I had always put her on a pedestal, which probably fueled a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Chloe, I'm just passing through. I'm not here for you. At that, Chloe let out a derisive laugh. Ethan, since when did you become such a liar? You can't even speak a single honest sentence. Just a few days ago you were claiming you didn't want to get married, and now here you are, chasing me all the way to the base. I've told you countless times, I'm focused on my career right now. I don't need you holding me back. Before she could say more, Leo cut in, his voice smooth and gentle. Colonel Miller, why don't you wait outside and cool off? I'll have a word with Ethan. He's come all this way for you, after all. We shouldn't be so cold to him. Chloe gave a slight humph and walked out of the diner. Leo leaned in close, the smile vanishing from his face. In a low voice only I could hear, he began to taunt me. You're just a backwoods nobody. What makes you think a colonel would ever marry you? Chasing her all the way to the base like this, you have no shame. You're just using your father's death to guilt her into marrying you, aren't you? Hick's life is cheap. He got what he deserved. Before he could say another word, the sharp crack of my hand connecting with his face echoed in the small diner. I had waited 2 lifetimes to deliver that slap, and I put every ounce of my strength behind it. 5 angry red fingerprints bloomed on Leo's handsome face. In my past life, after I had arrived at the base, Leo had said almost the exact same thing. I had been furious then, but I was afraid Chloe would accuse me of causing trouble, so I held back. But then Leo had thrown himself to the ground and claimed I had hit him. This time, I decided to actually give him something to cry about, saving him the effort of putting on a show. A flicker of shock crossed Leo's face. He clearly hadn't expected me to actually fight back. But that shock quickly turned into a look of malicious glee. He clutched his cheek, his voice full of feigned hurt. Colonel, he hit me. Chloe rushed back in at the sound of his voice. Ethan, you've gone too far. Apologize to him now. Leo, still holding his face, had a triumphant glint in his eye. In my past life, she had forced me to apologize. I tried to explain that Leo had provoked me and that I hadn't even touched him, but Chloe refused to listen. She couldn't believe Leo would say such cruel things. Leo reads poetry, she'd said. Shelley Pushkin. He's not a cruel person. This time, I didn't see the need to explain myself. My appetite was gone. I stood up to leave. It was the first time in all these years I had ever defied her, and she was livid. If you're not going to apologize, then you can just go right back to where you came from. I will not marry a brute like you. Hearing that, I replied coldly, "Don't worry, Chloe. You won't have to see me again." A flicker of panic crossed her face. What's that supposed to mean? It means exactly what you want it to mean. We're only engaged, we never signed any papers. The wedding is off. From now on, you and I have nothing to do with each other. You don't owe me anything. My father saved your life, but that doesn't mean you're obligated to marry me. Like you said, it was an accident. My father was a good man. He would have saved anyone in that situation. He didn't do it to trap you into marrying me. And his son isn't so pathetic that he needs to use his father's death to find a wife. Hearing my words, Chloe's face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and shame. I didn't mean it like that. I am grateful to your father. There's no need, I said, cutting her off. He's gone. Your words don't mean anything now. With that, I turned and walked back into the train station. Chloe seemed to think I had agreed to go back home. She let out a sigh of relief and caught up to me. I'll take you back to the station for the trip home, she said. Just give me a few more days to sort out the paperwork for you to join me. Even then, she still couldn't believe that I was serious about leaving her. I didn't have the energy to argue. Just then, there was a crash behind me. Leo had accidentally knocked over a table, sending the bowl of noodles I'd barely touched spilling all over his clothes. Chloe immediately stopped, her attention instantly shifting back to her precious first love. "Call me when you get home," she said, pressing a $100 bill into my hand. Then she turned and rushed back to Leo's side. I walked briskly into the station. I told myself not to cry, but the tears came anyway. Goodbye, Chloe. From this moment on, you are erased from my life. Whatever happens from now on, my happiness and my sorrow will have nothing to do with you. After 3 days and 2 nights on the rattling train, I finally arrived in Austin. In my past life, I had visited Austin a few times, but by then it was already a sprawling metropolis, a world-renowned hub of technology and culture. But back then, in 1985, Austin was just beginning its transformation from a relatively small city into a boomtown. 1985 was the perfect time to be there. The city was buzzing with energy, on the cusp of explosive growth. Opportunity was everywhere. Drawing on my memories and cooking skills from my past life, I quickly opened a small diner catering to the tastes of the many workers who were flocking to the city from all over the country. My place was a hit from day one because I could cook authentic dishes from all corners of the nation. People from all over who had come to Austin for work flocked to my diner, saying a meal there felt like a taste of home. In the first month alone, I cleared $2,000 in profit. Staring at the numbers in my ledger, I cried. They were tears of joy. I had earned my first real success all on my own. Half a year flew by. The diner was thriving, and my savings had reached $10,000, a significant milestone in those days. I was a bona fide success story. Hitting that mark in the 80s was a huge deal, more impressive in some ways than being a millionaire today. My business expanded. I went from renting 1 storefront to 3, and my staff grew to 6 people. I wasn't a stingy boss. I paid my employees well above the average wage and gave out generous bonuses, so everyone was motivated and worked hard. One day, while I was busy in the kitchen, I heard a surprised voice call my name. "Ethan?" I turned around to see Mr. Davis, the accountant from my hometown. He was in Austin on business and had just happened to wander into my diner for lunch. I was thrilled to see a familiar face. I brought him several of my best dishes and told him the meal was on the house. But Mr. Davis didn't touch his food. He just stared at me, his face full of urgency. "Ethan, what on earth are you doing here? You have no idea the chaos you've caused back home. The Millers have been turning the town upside down looking for you for the past 6 months. Chloe is beside herself." It turned out that 6 months ago, when I'd left for Austin, everyone back home, including the Millers, thought I was on my way to the base to marry Chloe. When I ran into Chloe and Leo during my layover, she had assumed the same thing before sending me away. She thought I had gone back home. No one knew I had continued on to Austin. This created a perfect storm of misunderstanding. Everyone in town thought I was with Chloe at the base, and Chloe thought I was back home. For the first few days, everything was quiet. But when Chloe didn't get a call from me to say I'd arrived safely, she called the village. That's when she found out I had never come back. I had simply disappeared. Everyone panicked. Chloe took leave from the base and started searching for me. In those days, there were no cell phones, no security cameras, and train tickets were anonymous. There was no way to track me. Chloe searched for 2 months with no luck. The police couldn't help, so everyone assumed the worst, that I had met with foul play on my journey. Mrs. Miller cried every day. Mr. Miller, in a fit of rage, broke Chloe's arm with a rolling pin, calling her an ungrateful monster and blaming her for getting me killed. The whole town pitied me, mourning my tragic fate. So you can imagine Mr. Davis's shock at finding me here in Austin, alive and well, and running my own business. Ethan, you have to come back with me, he pleaded. Everyone is waiting for you. I shook my head. I'm not going back. I'm doing well here in Austin. Mr. Davis, please, when you get back, just tell Mr. and Mrs. Miller that I'm safe, and they don't need to worry about me. Mr. Davis slapped his thigh in frustration. You stubborn kid. What about Chloe? We're not getting married, I said firmly. That was over a long time ago. After Mr. Davis left, I went back to work. Life in the 80s had its inconveniences. Besides no phones or internet, there were no digital payments. Everything was cash. Every night, I had to count the day's earnings by hand and take the cash to the bank the next day. I never kept too much money at the restaurant. It was too risky. But with a business as successful as mine, it was impossible not to attract some attention. One night, a heavy rain fell, cloaking the city in darkness. I was renting a small apartment in the alley behind the diner. I was just locking up for the night when a powerful shove sent me stumbling back inside. A rough-looking man with a nasty grin on his face followed me in. He was here for my money. Austin was full of people trying to make it big, some through hard work, and others by taking shortcuts. After he took the cash, the mugger slammed me down onto a table, raising his fist to beat me senseless. In that split second, I lunged forward and sank my teeth into his wrist. He yelped in pain, jumping back and clutching his bleeding hand. You bite like a dog, he snarled, his face contorted with rage. He cursed, and his eyes grew even more menacing. He wasn't going to let me get away with that. I used his moment of shock to break free and scrambled into the kitchen, my hands fumbling until they found the handle of a heavy cleaver. Stay back. I'll kill you if you come any closer. I tried to make my voice sound steady, but my palms were slick with sweat. But the man wasn't intimidated. He just sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. You think you can take me on, pretty boy? He lunged at me again, faster and more brutal this time. I was cornered. One thought screamed in my mind. I would not go down without a fight. Just as he was about to reach me, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Freeze! A woman in a military uniform stood in the doorway. The uniform itself commanded authority. The mugger took one look, yelped, and scrambled out the back door. It was Chloe. The police arrived shortly after and arrested the man. It turned out he was a wanted fugitive. When everything had settled down, Chloe turned to me, her expression a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. Ethan, she said, her voice heavy, you have no idea how hard I've been looking for you. She had come as soon as she heard the news from Mr. Davis. Come back with me, she said. Everyone back home is waiting for you. We'll get married. I've already submitted the paperwork to my commanding officer for you to join me. Stop this nonsense. I've spent the last 6 months taking the blame for your disappearance. I'm just glad you're safe. If anything had happened to you, I would never have forgiven myself. Her beautiful face was etched with fatigue. Hearing her say she would marry me should have made me happy, but I felt nothing. It was no longer important to me. Colonel, thank you for your help tonight, but you should go. I'm not going to marry you. I thought I made that clear. A flash of anger and embarrassment crossed Chloe's face. Ethan, don't push it. I'm already making a concession here. What more do you want from me? This tantrum of yours isn't going to do you any good. You're just jealous of Leo, aren't you? There's nothing going on between us. We're just kindred spirits. I shook my head. This isn't a tantrum. I just don't want to marry you. Whether you marry Leo or someone else, it has nothing to do with me. If you're worried about explaining this to your parents, I'll write them a letter. I'll tell them it was my decision, so they won't pressure you anymore. Hearing me say that, Chloe finally seemed to understand. For the first time, she truly believed that I no longer loved her, that I no longer wanted to be her husband. I could see the shock, confusion, and even a hint of relief on her face. I understood. She was finally free of the burden I represented. But why was there also a flicker of disappointment, of loss? I mean it, I said. already pulling out a piece of paper to write the letter to her parents. I meant it. Ethan, she started, her voice suddenly uncertain. It's not that I have no feelings for you at all. It's just, everyone always said I owed you. I felt so much pressure, like marrying you was just a duty I had to fulfill. That's why I pushed back so hard. She stumbled over her words, trying to explain. You don't have to, I said, handing her the letter. It doesn't matter anymore. Colonel, we're both free now. After Chloe left, life went on. The end of the year arrived, and it was time for me to go back home to visit my parents' graves. After 9 months in Austin, I had saved up $30,000. Returning to my small town now, I was the picture of success. I was dressed in stylish, modern clothes, a look inspired by the fashion I'd seen in magazines from Hong Kong. It was a style no one in my small town had ever seen before. Austin's proximity to major cultural centers meant it was years ahead in fashion compared to the rest of the country, especially a small rural town like mine. The moment I set foot in the village, I caused a sensation. Dozens of kids swarmed around me. I had brought back bags of candy and treats for everyone, and they were ecstatic. After my parents died, many kind people in the village had helped look out for me. I hadn't forgotten their kindness. I went door to door, handing out holiday envelopes with $200 in each. It was a fortune for them, and it caused another stir. Everyone was impressed, envious of the success I'd found out in the big city. Of course, I had a special gift for Mr. and Mrs. Miller, an envelope with $1,000 for each of them. They had raised me for 10 years. Even though I wouldn't be their son-in-law, I would never forget what they had done for me. Mr. Miller refused to take the money. Ethan, I can't take this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'd be too ashamed. Our family has let you down so badly. Mrs. Miller just cried. Ethan, she sobbed, my foolish daughter doesn't know how lucky she was. I did my best to comfort them. It was New Year's Eve, and Mr. and Mrs. Miller insisted I stay the night. Just then, a gust of cold wind announced the arrival of 2 more people. It was Chloe, and she had brought Leo home for the holidays. Chloe was stunned to see me. Leo just glared, his eyes burning with jealousy as he took in my stylish clothes. With them there, I didn't want to stay any longer and make things awkward for everyone. But Mrs. Miller refused to let me leave. Instead, she gave Leo the cold shoulder, acting as if he wasn't even there. In the end, I ended up staying in my old room. Mrs. Miller finally spoke to Leo, but only to say, you two aren't married. You won't be sleeping in the same room under my roof. I won't be the talk of the town. That night, Mrs. Miller put Leo in Chloe's room, but made Chloe sleep in the cold, unheated storage shed. There was no heater in there, and it was freezing, but Mrs. Miller didn't seem to care. Let her freeze, she muttered under her breath. Serves the heartless girl right. It was not a peaceful night. In the middle of the night, Leo needed to use the bathroom but refused to use the outhouse, complaining it was too dirty. Chloe ended up having to go out and borrow a chamber pot from a neighbor. This only made Mrs. Miller dislike Leo even more. This is how we live in the country, she snapped. If you don't like it, you can leave. Nobody invited you. Leo looked like he was about to cry. Mom, that's enough, Chloe finally said. Mrs. Miller pointed a finger at her daughter. If you marry that man, you are no longer my daughter. The fighting continued late into the night. The next morning, as I was getting ready to visit my parents' graves, I found my new jacket slashed to ribbons with a pair of scissors. It had to be Leo. He was consumed by jealousy, and after being humiliated by Mrs. Miller, he had taken all his frustration out on me. I wasn't bothered, but Mr. and Mrs. Miller were livid. Even Chloe, for the first time, lost her temper with Leo. Apologize. How could you do something like that? Then she turned to me, her face full of apology. Ethan, I am so sorry. Tell me how much the jacket cost. I'll pay you back. I shook my head. Forget it. It's not important. But Leo just exploded in a rage. You think you're so special now, you country bumpkin. What right do you have to wear clothes like that? You don't deserve it. Who knows where you got the money for it anyway? Probably did something shameful to earn it. A sharp slap echoed through the room. This time, it was Chloe who had struck him. Shut your mouth, she seethed. You hit me? Leo stammered before turning and running out of the house. He was gone. Chloe didn't follow him. She just stood there, looking at me with a tormented expression. Go after him, I said. I'm fine. I'm going to visit my parents' graves. Without another word, I left the Miller house and walked to the cemetery. I left town that same day. Whatever happened between Chloe and Leo after that was no longer my concern. The following spring, Chloe showed up in Austin. She brought me a new jacket, the same style as the one Leo had ruined, saying it was a replacement. I accepted it, but she lingered. "Ethan, I was wrong," she said. I realize now how good you were to me. Leo, he's just too much. I didn't realize what I had with you until it was gone. You can't build a life on poetry." Her eyes were filled with regret as she asked, her voice barely a whisper, Could we still? That's all in the past," I said, cutting her off. I didn't let her finish. Defeated, Chloe left. After that, she wrote to me almost every month. I never opened the letters. I just threw them, unread, into the fire. Another year passed. I now owned 3 restaurants, employed over 30 people, and my annual income was well over $100,000. When I returned home that year, I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I visited my parents' graves and left before dawn. A few people from my hometown had followed me to Austin looking for work, and I always did my best to help them get on their feet. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe and Leo finally got married in 1988. Apparently, Leo had forced her into it. She had been reluctant, but he had drugged her one night and then caused a huge scandal at her headquarters, leaving her with no choice but to marry him to save her career. Their marriage was a disaster. They fought constantly, and Leo never got along with her parents. Eventually, Chloe requested a transfer to a remote outpost just to get away from him. They lived apart for years and never had children. By the 90s, I was the chairman of a publicly traded company. I had expanded from restaurants into tourism, entertainment, and real estate. Having lived this life before, I knew exactly which industries were about to take off. My personal net worth was over $1 billion, but I had never married. Romance held no interest for me. My work was my life. The next I heard of Chloe was in '96. She had been dishonorably discharged from the military. Leo had wanted to move abroad, complaining that he couldn't live the life he wanted on their income. Chloe, who by then was a high-ranking staff officer in charge of a significant budget, refused. In a desperate move, Leo stole a large sum of money from the funds Chloe managed and tried to flee the country. He was caught, of course, and sent to prison. But Chloe was held responsible for the security breach and was forced to resign. By then, Mr. and Mrs. Miller had both passed away, and I had no remaining connection to her. Another 20 years passed. It was 2024 and I was 65 years old, the same age I had been when I died in my first life. My net worth had grown to $50 billion. I was still single, but I had dedicated much of my life and fortune to philanthropy. One evening, my assistant was driving me to a charity gala. As we drove through the underground parking garage, I saw a figure through the tinted window that was both familiar and strange. It was Chloe. She was wearing a worn-out security guard's uniform. Her hair was white, and her face was a roadmap of a hard-lived life. She was slumped in a plastic chair, dozing lightly, a nightstick held loosely in her hand. The once brilliant, commanding officer was now just another security guard in a dimly lit parking garage. My assistant whispered, "Chairman, should I wake her?" I shook my head, signaling for him to keep driving. The car was silent except for the soft music playing on the radio. I closed my eyes, and the memories of the past washed over me. In my first life, I had given her a lifetime of devotion and love, only to be met with coldness and betrayal. In this life, I had chosen to let go, to build a life for myself. Her choices had led her here. My choices had led me to where I was. The car rolled smoothly past her. I didn't ask the driver to stop. In the rearview mirror, I saw her stir. She looked up, her eyes following our taillights with a vacant, weary expression. "Chairman, did you know her?" my assistant asked, his curiosity piqued. He was testing the waters. I smiled a little. Just an old acquaintance. Later that evening, I stood on the stage at the gala, facing a sea of flashing cameras, and gave a brief acceptance speech. "On our journey through life," I said, "we meet many people. Some of them are there to teach us how to grow. For that, we should be grateful they were ever a part of our lives." I gave a slight bow, and the room erupted in applause. Back home, I stood by my penthouse window, looking out at the glittering city lights. Austin had become a world-class city, a river of light and motion. I thought of Chloe, sitting alone in that dark garage. The feeling was complex, but it wasn't hatred. Not anymore. The next day, I had my assistant contact the security company that managed the garage. I made a substantial, anonymous donation to their employee assistance fund, with the stipulation that it be used to improve Chloe's quality of life. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't charity. It was just a final, quiet farewell to the past. I never heard another word about Chloe Miller after that. A cool breeze drifted in through the open window. I closed it, turned back to my desk, and got back to work. My life was still moving forward.